My name is Saad and I work for CSIS. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the banking malware. First, I'd like to explain what it actually is. So the banking malware is the kind of malware which is designed to steal money from the bank accounts of people. It's not the malware which is designed to attack banks and steal money directly from them, but it's supposed to use the users and kind of trick them into basically giving away their money. So there are many factors in it. I'll be talking about different phases of the attack. Historically speaking, it's, I think, one of the biggest problems in the last decade or so. Zeus was the first banking malware that was widely popular. And over the years, security products have kept improving, and so did the banking malware. So right now we're at a stage where the banking malware from 7-8 years ago is much different from today, but it still works. So security products and banking malware both have kept evolving. So I'll try and go through what it looks like right now and won't focus too much on the history. My talk will be divided into 5 sections. So I'll be going through the infection vectors, the process of infection, CNC communication between the bots and the CNC servers, and then how the money actually gets transferred and what we as users can do to prevent ourselves from being the victim of this attack. A couple of words about the CSIS. We're one of the biggest security companies in Denmark. And here are some facts about CSIS. I will not go too much into details with these either. If you'd like to know more about CSIS, you could contact me later, or you can visit us at csis.dk. We're also working with a number of security agencies and some other partners. So here's a list of a few of them. All right, so how the banking malware works. The first step is how to infect the people. So the goal of this step is to infect as many people who have the bank accounts as possible. And the most common method that is used for this is spam emails. This is one method that works the best. And the reason for that is that almost all companies use Outlook or some similar mail servers. They have their own mail servers, and they're not properly configured. So usually you're more likely to be able to pass through the defenses on people's own mail servers than, for example, on bigger mail servers like Gmail or Yahoo and so on. That's why we see most of the attacks go through people's business email addresses. Right here is an example of a spam email. This is from 23rd of August, so it's fairly recent. It was actually from the same day when I was making this presentation. And we can see that there's a small file attached to it, and then there is some text. And this is quite personalized. It's a bit funny because they wrote there, "Dear eCrime," and the email address that we have is eCrime, and the name that we've registered there is eCrime. So they would be, using the name from the email, and then the sender email is a legit-looking fake email address most of the times. And the text in it is usually very brief, which kind of doesn't say much, so it kind of encourages the user to click on the attachment and kind of see what's in it. Here's a separate example of that. It's from the same spam run, but we can see that the name of the file is different from the previous one. So it's random characters. And then the subject of the email is different, the text is a bit different, and the person who is supposed to be sending it is also different. This makes sure that all these campaigns don't get flagged. So if they would be using the same file name, it's more likely that somebody would block it, or the same sender address and so on. So they use different parameters to kind of disguise the email. Second thing is that they're using botnets to send those emails, so they're not coming from the same IP address, and hence it's not easy to block them based on an IP address. And there are millions of spam emails being sent every day. So what actually is in the email? So the idea for them is for the user to click on the attachment. So inside the attachment, we can see that there's a JavaScript file. So it's like a .js file. It's not supposed to run in the browser, but the user is supposed to double-click it. Once the user double clicks it, then the malware starts to work. And the JavaScript is just the example from that day when I was looking. There have been very different kind of files that we've seen. .scr files, they are pretty much similar to .exe files. You could just basically change the extension of .exe to .scr and it will still work. .wsf are Windows script files. They're like VB script files. And then Microsoft Office files, we've seen quite a lot of them. They're using macros in them. So basically you open some file which looks like a Word file. It is actually a legit Word file. It opens in Microsoft Word. And once you open it up, it says that you need to enable your macros to see the document. And if you enable them, then the code executes, which actually is malicious code. And we have seen also .exe files, but they are decreasing because there are more and more mail clients which actually just reject any .exe attachment or any .exe attachment which is contained in a zip file as well. So that's a bit declining, but that did not stop the malware producers. They just moved on to different ones. There are some other infection vectors. The most common one is spam email. In this talk, I'll be focusing mostly on the most common stuff and won't go too much into things which are there, but they're not the biggest threats. So from the infection vector point of view, the biggest threat to any person is spam emails. We, at our company, receive around 50 to 100 serious malware emails every day. And that's probably the case for many other companies as well. So we've seen a spam email with a malicious zip file. There could also be another option where there's actually a link, and that link opens up a zip file from some server. And that is also one option that is used extensively these days as well. Then there's another thing called exploit kits. The idea is a bit older, and in start there used to be these exploit kits. Now it's a bit more, the principle is similar, but the kit part of it is reduced a bit. So basically you hack a legitimate website which the users visit, and you infect it with some malicious code. And they're basically exploiting some vulnerability in the browser or in the some plugins and so on. And if a user visits the website, it gets infected. And this is much more critical problem because the user doesn't really see that he gets infected. In the spam email, the user actually has to click on the email and so on. So the people who are aware of this kind of thing, they are less likely to do that. But exploit kits are a serious problem, and anybody could get infected. But the good thing is that they're not as common as the spam emails, and they're used mostly in a little targeted attacks, but not necessarily. We've seen a lot of ransomware being spread through them as well. So that's also a threat, but not as huge as spam emails. All right, so what's the objective of the first stage of malware? The file that we've seen in this previous section, a zip file with JavaScript or any .executable, what it's supposed to do. So the first thing it does is it downloads another binary from some server. And usually they have a couple of hard-coded links, 3, 4 we've also seen. And it tries to download the loader from one of those. So if the loader, it manages to download it, fair enough. If it can't find it, then it'll try the second URL and third URL and so on. Sometimes the file that it downloads is not a normal executable. It is rather somehow, it needs some kind of decoding. So that's also the responsibility of this first stage malware. And because of this very limited functionality, it is usually very small in size. We're seeing 10 KBs, 15 KBs mostly. Because of simple functionality, they can just create a new one real fast. So if all their CNC servers from where they were serving these malware, they get blocked, they will just create a few new servers and start sending new spam emails with the new links. So they try and keep it simple. All right. The second part is the infection process. So in this stage, the loader or the first stage malware, when it is already in the system, it wants to infect the system, and there are a few things that it wants to do. Their main objective is that it should be pretty hard to detect that the system is actually infected once it's infected. Secondly, it should be able to communicate with its CNC servers. And thirdly, it should be able to survive the reboot, because most of this malware runs in memory. So if you shut the computer down, it stops working. So they want to make sure that when you restart the computer, it's still up. Right. So this is an infection chain of malware called Panda Zeus. It's fairly recent. This one is from last week or so. So in there we can see that a number of steps are taken. So the first one, I'm not sure if it's visible from behind, but I'll speak. So the first line that you can see in this chain it's called panda.exe. It's the malware itself. And I've named it panda.exe. Usually they are random file names. So what it does is that it downloads another component from the internet. So the panda.exe file in this case would be called the loader. So we have the first stage, then we have the loader, and then the loader downloads the payload. So there's usually 3 malware executables being used these days. There can be more or less, but that's what's being used mostly these days. And this payload, once it's downloaded, it's executed. So this is a precious property. They don't want to make it public so much, and it only downloads once everything up till now works. So you can basically create signatures and so on of that. So that's why they use some kind of caution and download payload only on the machines that they're very confident that they can infect. So once the payload executes, it also doesn't execute as a process, which normally all programs in Windows do. It tries to inject itself into some of the legitimate processes. And we can see in this case it injects itself into 2 svc host.exe processes, which are already running on the Windows. There's actually a bunch of those, so they're very good because you can actually create a few more and nobody would notice that it's something weird. And the last step on this one is a cmd.exe being run. And this is usually a batch script. And its job is to delete all the executables that are on the system up till now. So the standard thing that people notice when they infect themselves with malware is after they double-click the malware, it goes away and they don't see anything happening. So they're like, maybe it was some broken program and nothing happened. Some of the malware actually also use the fact that to kind of fool people. They just show a message that this program is broken, try again, something like this. But the malware is actually executed already. Now let's talk a little bit about injection. Why is this used? So the first benefit it has is that the malware doesn't show up in the list of processes. So if you open up the task manager on your computer, you can see all the processes that are being run. And if there is a weird one, maybe somebody would notice. So, but if you inject it in one of the legit processes, it is very difficult to detect. It's also difficult for most of the antiviruses to detect because most of them actually don't detect stuff in the memory. Some of them do, but most don't. The second thing is that it's also very difficult to kill it. So to kill it, you have to kill the actual legit process. And one of the most used process is explorer.exe, and everything in the Windows, all the user interaction stuff actually goes through the explorer.exe. So if you kill that, the computer stops working. So most of the times it's very safe bet to inject into explorer.exe. Another problem that it has is that if you try and debug explorer.exe, you try to pause it and see what the code is doing, your computer, you can't use it as much as you would be able to use in case of some other process. So it makes it more difficult for users to disinfect themselves. It is difficult for security researchers, so that's what's being used mostly. We've also seen, for example, Internet Explorer.exe, Chrome, and so on. And after the injection, the loader deletes the first stage malware, the loader itself, and also the payload from the hard disk. and they copy the payload to temp folder usually, or some other temporary location from where they can restart it in case of a computer restart. Now the second thing, or the next thing, is the persistence. Persistence is basically to be able to run the malware once your computer restarts. So yeah, the thing we see mostly is the temp folder is where the binary sits, and run key is what points to it. We can see an example in here. This is a real example of NeverQuest. We can see this that the binary is stored in C users, username, app data, local, and then there's a random folder name and a random file name. So this also makes the detection a bit harder, as the folder name is random, file name is random. It will be random on all computers, so you can't make a signature of the file name because it's different on all the machines. And this will get executed upon the computer restart. We've seen more trickier methods of persistence, because the persistence is the single most, the bottleneck place where you can actually see if you're infected or not. Because all the malware has to rerun when the computer restarts. So they try and use some kind of persistence method, and there are not many options. So run keys are generally just two. There's a local machine run key and there's a local user run key, and you can just see them in 2 minutes, and you'll be able to find the malware. So to stop that, we have seen, for example, scheduled tasks. They do the same thing. You can make a scheduled task, which is a part of Windows by default, and that scheduled task will restart the whatever you want at whatever time. You can set a time, or you can set reboot, and so on. So some malware are using that, and then there is malware which can be run as a service. So we have services in Windows, and they are background processes that keep running all the time. And if you can register your malware as a service, this is very difficult for people to detect, because nobody actually looks at services most of the cases. And then there's one very interesting one, which is used by Dredex. It was used in the past. Now they've switched to a different mechanism. What they did was they hooked the shutdown function of the computer. So when you're infected with Dredex and you try and shut down or restart, the malware would get a trigger for that, and they would drop the malware from the memory onto the hard disk and create a run key pointing to that. And this happens just before the shutdown, so you can't really see it after it actually happens. And when the computer shuts down, boots up, so there's already a run key, there is a file on the system. It would open that file using the run key and execute the malware. As soon as the malware starts executing, it deletes again the run key and the file. So while the malware is running, there's nothing on the hard disk at all. There's no registry key pointing to the malware. There's no malware itself on the system. This was very good, but this had a big drawback, that if you actually hard reset your computer, computer gets disinfected because it can't restart itself. So I guess they were having problems with that, so they switched to scheduled tasks. All right. The next thing I'm going to talk about is CNC communication. So all the malware, banking malware, has to communicate with the CNC. This is very critical, because in today's world, things are changing real fast. Security companies are really, really good, and they will be blocking stuff very fast. So in order to stay ahead of them, they need to be able to communicate with the people that they've infected and use that leverage to give them new instructions, to update their binary, to update whatever information they have in there. And this is also one of the very important factors of the malware itself. So it requires some talk. All right. So in the previous two sections, we've seen how the people get the malware itself and how the infection gets completed. Once the malware is running as a thread in some kind of legit Windows process, and there's a way for it to persist, it's pretty solid. So after that, most of them actually try to check in with their CNC server. And the idea here is that they want to tell the CNC server that I have managed to infect one of the guys, and they upload some information. And that information actually usually goes into a database which criminals can see. So they have these beautiful charts where they can see that they've infected this many people in this part of the world, and this much of them are using Windows XP, and this much are using this. And there are also external IPs that are sent to them. And then there's also a thing called bot ID, which is sent there. So bot ID is basically a unique identifier identifying a bot. It is usually generated based on certain features of the system. So for example, the name of the computer is one factor, the installation date is one factor, and so on. So they will basically just hash it or use some kind of algorithm to generate a unique ID on that. And that is actually used in communication quite often. And in some cases, we've also seen the list of apps. So this has two actually, how to say, purposes. The first one is that it helps them to find the security researchers, because if I have a virtual machine and I'm running malware on it, I'm going to have some tools that help me analyze the malware. So I'll, for example, have Wireshark, I'll have some kind of a debugger, I'll have Fiddler or Process Explorer and stuff like that. So if they see this stuff, they can identify that this is a security researcher, so they can do the opposite research to see what security researchers are using these days, and then they can use that, improve their malware to block what they're doing and so on. The other functionality of it is that sometimes they manage to get a jackpot by infecting some of the very critical systems, for example, banks' internal systems, or some other systems that are using some special apps, for example, banks' internal software or some libraries with some stuff like that. So in that case, they have this option to do further investigation on that at a manual level. This is a real message, check-in message from Druidex. This is the decrypted form. It is actually encrypted in several layers. I'll get to that shortly. And in this, we can see that the first thing is unique, which is actually the bot ID. So this is one hash that they generated. The first part is actually the name of the computer, and then there's a hash based on installation date and so on. The second is botnet. They have several botnets, so they want to keep them separated. So the client actually tells the CNC which botnet I want to talk to. So in this case, it's 220. And then there are version and system. This is some internal thing for the malware which they're using to keep track of which version people are using, so they can update them with the latest version. And they have these backward compatibility and stuff. So the older version of malware has lower functionality. So as they keep adding things, they keep improving. So they want to keep a track of this. And then there's a type called bot. There's another type in this case, which is node. I will not go into details on that because that will be a bit long. And then there's the IP, which is usually the external IP of the system. It's not the internal IP, 192.168 kind, but it is the external one, and they're using certain services to get that. For example, there are certain websites that you can visit, and they will show you your external IP. So they use one of those, and then they send the external IP. So these are very good to identify serious breaches. For example, if you manage to infect some security agency of some country, they usually have unique IPs registered to them. So this is used for that. Also, they can plot nice graphs based on that to see which part of the world they are hitting, and so on. And then there's this public key, which is used for communication by the CNC server to the bot. So I'll shortly explain it a bit more. But yeah, this is actually one of the keys generated by the bot, and it is sent to the CNC server. So whatever CNC server sends to the bot later will be encrypted with this public key. So only this bot can decrypt it. Anybody in the middle is not able to do that because of the way asymmetric cryptography works. All right. The second thing in here is the configuration. So configuration is basically a set of settings or a list of stuff that the malware can do. And these configurations are the parameters to those functionality. So what banking malware can do, for example, let's say it can attack certain banks and steal money from them. So what are those banks? That's what the configuration will say. So they can update this configuration with more bank names, for example. How they attack those banks, they have this thing called HTTP injects. I'll also explain that a bit shortly. So they will be sending new HTTP injects, and the bank keep updating their websites, so certain injects stop working after a while. And then they will have more injects or updated versions of them and so on. CNC servers, there's usually a list of them in all the malware payloads. So the list actually is dynamic. It's not a static one. And the reason for that is that security people are working on these malware. So they identify these CNC servers. They talk to the people who are running them and the companies who are hosting them. So they keep taking them down. So they need to have a steady flow of new CNC servers in order to keep their botnet working. So even if one of the CNC servers is working, it should be able to send the new ones to the bots, and the botnet keeps alive. That is why it's extremely hard to take down these banking malware botnets, because you need to take down all CNC servers at the same time. And there are quite a lot of them. Usually 30, 40 is pretty normal. And they are in diverse geographical locations where different police works, different countries have different laws and so on. It's sometimes not very easy to do that. And this is what they're exploiting, and that's why it's almost impossible to take down a really good botnet unless you can somehow hack it in a way that you can attack it from inside. But by shutting down CNC servers, it's extremely difficult. And there are other configurations depending on the malware and what its functionality is. So here's a real configuration from Druidex. It's a small snippet of it. It's not all of it. It's usually 400, 500 lines long and pretty big. So in this case, it's in the nice format of XML, and it's pretty easy to read. In the first section, in the first line, there's a hash which uniquely identifies this config. So the bot can, ask for an updated one, and if it gets an updated one, how does it know it's updated or not based on this hash? So if it has a different hash, they usually can use that. All right, the next is the URL. So this is actually a URL which shows which bank to attack. And this is actually a regular expression which particularly targets certain bank. In this case, it's one bank. And it has two URLs, so it is using a regular expression to cover both of them. And there's another section down there. It's called form grabber. So what this part of the malware does is it actually is able to grab the form. So if you fill up a form, for example, use your username and password, and you click submit, this part of the malware is able to get whatever you entered in that form. It could be more than username, password, and so on. In YouTube, in this case, it would most probably be the username, password, and then they have your username, password. And this is quite useful for a number of purposes. They are using that in their huge ecosystem. So this is one example. They're getting all sorts of credentials that they can, and then they're using those for further infections and other purposes. And here is an HTTP inject. So how does that work? This is actually the main feature of banking malware and the reason why it's so successful. So if you have a browser and you visit a website, what actually happens? You make a request, the request goes to some server, and server responds with something. And then whatever functionality takes place in the server stays in the server. In the end, what the user gets is some kind of HTML code. So if you can change that code in the browser, the user can see whatever you want it to see, and it doesn't have anything to do with the server. So for example, let me give you an example. Let's say you visit your bank site, and it says that you have $500 in your account. And if I am in the browser and I can change the HTML code, I can change that 500 to, for example, 5,000. And you will see that you have 5,000, but it is actually not true. And this is the main feature that banking malware has, and they are using that to steal people's money. I will get to how do they actually do that in a few minutes. So in this particular case, what it does is that it finds a pattern, which is see data and then form something, and then it replaces that pattern with the one that we see below, and it's basically a JavaScript that it injects into the page. So this JavaScript gets injected into the browser of the victim, and it is actually not on the CNC server. It doesn't affect the other people visiting that website is just on the browser of that particular person. And then we have some additional modules. This is actually used for various purposes, and since it's a fully working system, they can just download whatever they want. So for example, VNC is a very common thing. It's something like TeamViewer or VNC probably, or no, or remote desktop. So you can basically control people's computer using that. So once somebody's infected, you can log into their machine as a criminal and do whatever you want in there. There's key logging modules which will log people's keys. There's process memory scanning, very good for point of sale devices. So you can basically scan their memory and get everybody's credit card who has done some shopping that day. And it's also used for identification of critical systems. For example, if you manage to infect a bank, some employee of the bank, you can do more research on that, let's say, and so on. There are many more modules, and depending on the malware, they are used if deemed necessary. Encryption is pretty interesting and very important for a malware to work correctly, because all the stuff that we saw, the check-in and so on, they can be easily identified on the network. And if you have a network device that scans your users, you can easily see who is infected by looking for those keywords. So they all use encryption, pretty much all of them, and it's usually strong encryption. However, we have seen a lot of them using custom encryption. And why they do that? It's because people have to write tools manually to break them. For the standard encryption, there's already tools available, and it's easier to break it compared to the custom one. So custom one, you have to debug the code and go through all for, I don't know, a few days or a few weeks. And then you can basically get what they're doing. But it takes time and slows researchers down, which is very good for them, because they need time, and time is money. Because they have more time to transfer money before the security people catch up. So there are hybrid and layered encryption, which is that you encrypt something and then the output you encrypt it further, then the output you encrypt it further, and so on. This is an example of Druidex encryption scheme, which is one of the most popular banking malware. So the config that we've seen a little while ago is one of the most critical things that they want to hide. So when a server sends a config file to the bot, it actually encrypts it with some XOR encryption scheme. This is fairly trivial. You have a few bytes, and then you XOR all the bytes with those bytes, and it's quite easy to crack, even if you don't know the key. But they don't stop there. So the output of that, they encrypt it with the RC4, which is a symmetric key cryptography. And the key for RC4, they encrypt it with the public key that we saw a while ago in the check-in message. So that makes it extremely solid already. And then they have a third step on top of it. They encapsulate all that in standard TLS, which is standard encryption scheme that everybody uses. So TLS is easy to break because there are already man-in-the-middle tools that can do that. If you control one of the endpoints, you can easily break that. It's not possible if you don't control any of the endpoints. But yeah, once you do that, then you have to break all this further encryption. And the most difficult thing is to know what they're actually using, and then once you know, then you can go ahead with that. But it takes time for people to figure out what exactly they're doing, and that's the time delaying tactic that is used quite often. All right, so now we're gonna move on to how the banking malware actually works in terms of stealing money, the money transfer. So I'll quickly go through the three different things. So the first one is stealing credentials part. We have seen already form grabber feature. So the malware injects itself into the browser, and then it can see the stuff that's being sent in the browser, for example, in the forums, or through the post requests, which are what is used on the back end for sending data from the browser to the CNC server. So they can hook that and extract that, which is in the unencrypted form. And there are many banks in the world who actually don't have the two-factor authentication. So if you actually have those credentials, you can just transfer money. And that's what's used by some banking malware. It was used by Duriza a while ago. Then they switched to a different method, which we'll get to shortly. And the second method, which is a bit more complicated, or at least requires a bit more effort, is redirect method. Yeah, I should mention here is that once the credentials are stolen, they don't usually log in to the bank from their own machine, because that would flag their IP. And also the banks have this thing that they monitor their users and have their IPs logged in. So if you log in from a different IP suddenly, like for example, I live in Denmark and I have a bank account here. If my account suddenly gets logged in from Cuba, most likely the bank will block it. So in order to stop these kind of problems, they use the VNC module that we talked about a little while ago, and log into the victim's machine and use the victim's browser to log into his own bank account and transfer money. So this way it's pretty hard for bank to actually know if it was a criminal or the guy just himself did it. The redirect method, in this case what the banking malware does is they create a whole replica of the bank site. And this replica is hosted on one of their own servers. The reason it works pretty much similar to the phishing, but the difference is that the user do not see the URL where it is actually hosted. Since they have injected into the browser, they can just change that. So you see the actual URL of the bank, the fact that there's this green lock in the corner, it's still there. So the user has no idea that he's actually on a fake website. And there you can enter credentials. They will of course get the credentials because it's their own site. They can also do the man in the middle by using those credentials to log into the real bank, and then if the bank asks for something like two-factor auth, they can just create a new page in there and ask the user to give it to that. So they're kind of collaborating with the user by tricking them into giving them all the information they need. And since they control all the website, they can just do it pretty fast. This method is used by Druidex. It's also used by Duriza in the past. And yeah, it's responsible for a lot of losses. The next thing is automated transfer system. This is one thing which is pretty fascinating because it works fully automatically. And since although criminals have these call centers and so on, they have quite a lot of staff. But if somebody can use this, it's of course better for them because it's fully automatic. So the way it works is that as we have seen the Inject things a while ago, the users when the user logs into the bank site, there's already code injected into that, and that code knows that the user is actually on the, for example, transfer page, or it's just past the logged in page. And then they can use, for example, since it's a code running inside the browser, they can do stuff there. So for example, what they can do is that they can contact their CNC server from within the browser that, okay, this guy is already logged in. You should send me an account number to which I can transfer the money from here. So once they have the account number, they could just ask the user for the two-factor auth code by tricking them. So one thing that we've seen in NeverQuest, which is also another banking malware, is that they say that you have received some money. So in order to kind of get that money in your account, you need to enter your two-factor auth code. So when the user enters that two-factor auth code, that auth code is actually used to transfer money out of his account rather than giving him money. And they can, of course, show it that he actually received money rather than lost because they control the browser. And by the time the user figured it out, it's already too late. Yeah, this is used by NeverQuest, for example, and been used by other malware as well in the past. All right, since we've talked about most of the things so far, how it actually works from start to end, so what we can do actually to protect ourselves. There are a number of tips. The most important one is that once you receive emails, be very vigilant about them. Do not click on links in the emails or open attachments unless you're expecting them. This is, I think, the most straightforward rule and will help quite a lot because most of the attacks we see come through spam emails. This is by far the most useful way to not get infected. Second thing you can use is to show file extensions because we've seen different malware that have a different extension. For example, a malware which is .exe malware, but it actually shows the icon of a PDF file. So the user doesn't know that if it's a PDF or not because by default the extensions are hidden. So he would think it's a PDF file and is more likely to click it. So have the extensions shown so you could see what it actually is. And another thing that I mentioned is the startup is one of the easiest ways to find malware. So check your startup from time to time to make sure that there is no weird program in there that you did not install. And anything that you did not install, you should just remove from time to time. And network traffic monitoring is also a good thing. It's a little hard to do on your own computer because of all the encryption and so on. For example, with Wireshark, you get the traffic which is already encrypted if it is encrypted. Also, you can use, for example, Fiddler, but for that you need to make these certificates, install these root certificates, which is in itself a security problem. But you can use that at company network level. So there you can monitor the traffic and have a contract with one of those CNC server providers. So you have the latest CNC servers, and if anybody's communicating them, you should be able to figure them out. And you can also check if any of your legit Windows processes are injected into, and there are some tools to look into that. You can just run the tool and it'll show you all the processes, and the one which are injected into, they will be flagged as red. So that's also pretty good. And another very good thing that is very helpful is to use the mobile banking apps to check your bank account's balance regularly. Most of the banks provide one-day kind of alerts where you get a daily alert of how much money you have. And since you know how much you spent and so on, and how much more money you're expecting, you can, using this method, figure out the problem very fast. And if you can figure it out, you can talk to the banks. Most of the banks actually insure your money. So if you lost the money because of some malware and so on, they will reimburse it. But for them to reimburse it, you need to tell them as fast as possible, and you need to provide them some kind of documentation, so on, that this was, of course, malicious attack. And that's all that I have in terms of what I'm going to say. So questions time.
No questions? I got them. So have you looked into how widespread phishing attacks is for banking information, for instance, in Denmark, with the banking credentials? You also need to use on a lot of different sites, and there's no official list on which websites you can expect this dialog to appear.
You mean the NemID?
Yeah, gambling websites are legally required to use NemID login, for instance, and just fish a gambling website and then use the credentials to log into people's bank account.
Yeah, this is a serious bottleneck, and we've seen a lot of problems with it in Denmark because it's just one thing, and you can use it for all the things. So these applets that they're using, you can see the URL of from where that applet is actually loaded. You can see that in the browser by right-clicking that applet and clicking inspect, so you can see where it's actually communicating. And there's one legit place where there's actually this applet is coming from, and then all the fake ones are, of course, fake. So this can be used, but of course, for an average user, this is a problem. And there's a lot of NemID phishing going on. The other thing that is useful is to kind of, since I see a lot of phishing sites, it's pretty easy to identify them because there's some problem with that, but I understand that it's probably not that easy for an average user. But for us, I think we can just check the URL where the applet is being loaded from, and that should be good enough.
Cool. Any other questions? Let's give Saad a hand.